For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition. That's what the American people deserve. Yesterday, I also spoke with Vice President Harris. She's been a partner and a public servant. She ran an inspiring campaign, and everyone got to see something that I learned early on to respect so much, her character. She has a backbone like a ramrod. She has great character, true character. She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran. You know, the struggle for the soul of America, since our very founding, has always been an ongoing debate and still vital today. I know for some people, it's a time for victory, to state the obvious. For others, it's a time of loss. Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree.
Wow. Just wow. So that was Joe Biden at the White House today talking about the aftermath of the 2024 U.S. presidential election, which will go down as one of the greatest moments in American history. That's a fact. It was an extremely interesting election season with many unexpected twists and turns along the way, but ultimately, it's hard to respect his remarks today since he just recently called us supporters of President-elect Trump garbage. Literal garbage. Before the election, Biden, Kamala, and their allies on the campaign trail were constantly accusing Trump supporters of being bigots, fascists, racists, xenophobes, even Nazis. But now their tune is radically changing due to Kamala's epic loss of historic proportions. It's really just quite insulting to anybody with a brain. If Biden really thinks he can ignore his team's nasty smear campaign and the divisive nature of it, then he's woefully mistaken, because those of us who were watching him will never, ever forget it. Nope, not a chance. Democrats have become the party of division, manipulation, polarization, and inflammatory propaganda. And arguably, it is their remarks on the campaign trail which set the stage for not one, but two failed assassination attempts against President-elect Trump's life in less than 2 months, by the way. Just let that sink in for a moment. Before the attack in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, we hadn't seen an assassination attempt on a U.S. president in over 43 years. And yet, after 4 years of nasty rhetoric and lies and propaganda, Biden wants to end his time in office by pushing unity. It's entirely disingenuous. Thankfully, the days of Biden and Harris being in the White House will be over soon, and we'll return to having a real leader in charge who's actually capable of bringing this country together. That's exactly what President-elect Trump did in this election, and it worked like a charm, by the way. And speaking of unity, there's still a question of whether or not President-elect Trump will have a divided government in Congress upon entering office, which could create some logistical challenges for implementing our MAGA mandate. Although, things are looking good as of right now because, according to the latest from the Associated Press, Republicans are much closer to earning a majority in the House of Representatives than Democrats are. And again, that's just as of right now. That could change, but things are looking good because Republicans are currently holding 207 seats, while Democrats are holding just 194 seats. And there are still several seats yet to be called, so we'll see what happens, but Republicans only need 11 of them to keep their majority. And should they keep it, then we'll have a golden opportunity to get Trump's agenda passed into law. It's time to save America. Now, as it stands now, Republicans have just won the presidency. the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, a majority of the seats in the Senate, and we're on track to secure the House majority too, officially making this election cycle a red wave across the board. And in theory, if all things go according to plan, then Trump will have all the tools that he needs to make this country better, safer, stronger, more formidable, and greater than ever before. All we need to do is let him get to work. Joining us now to discuss is Republican Congressman Bob Good, the U.S. Representative for Virginia's 5th Congressional District. Congressman Good, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to ask you about this sweeping Republican victory all across the country at multiple levels. It's really surreal to see. What do you make of it?
It was interesting watching the clip you just showed of Joe Biden, and it seems like he's aged 5 years since the last time that I saw him. And to think that he, Kamala Harris, the Democrats generally wanted to have him serve another 4 years. But they didn't lose because of Joe Biden's dementia or Kamala Harris's incompetence. You know, what did they run on? They ran on abortion. They ran on, as you said, Trump's a Nazi. They ran on that his supporters are garbage. They ran on a so-called threat to democracy because they had no issues. They have intentionally done everything they can to destroy this country over the last 4 years. And this Biden was the guy who said 4 years ago in his first speech after the election, he was going to be the uniter in chief. And he's done anything but that. But the American people have suffered under these 4 years, and they have made a dramatic decision to go, even as Joe Biden just said, a different vision for America, a different philosophy of what we should be as a country. They have voted for secure borders. They have voted to reduce our federal spending. They have voted to return us to energy dominance. They've voted to end the weaponization against the federal government, against its political opponents. And it's a resounding victory, and we're going to keep the House.
Yeah, absolutely. And we heard some other similar platitudes from Kamala Harris, and she was coming out just yesterday saying, everything's going to be fine, don't worry, calm down. But here's my question. I want to ask this to you because this is really concerning and perplexing to me. So if Kamala Harris really believes that Donald Trump is some kind of fascist, then why would she come out after losing to him greatly to say everything's going to be fine? It's almost like she was just saying whatever it would take to demonize him, to humanize him, and ultimately win that election, and it didn't work. And now it's like she's coming back and pretending as if that never happened, or we should just forget about it. And I want to ask you, I mean, just thinking about the impact of that, I mean, they brainwashed so many of our fellow Americans, radicalized them, spewed nonsense, and now they just want to pretend like it never happened? I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. They were lying to us, of course, with repeating that over and over again, actually acting like Nazis by repeating the same lie over and over again, hoping that it would somehow become the truth to some people. But the American people rejected it resoundingly. Some 55% or so of Americans voted for change. That's significant in the way that our country is so divided, or it's so close politically. But we're going to end up with somewhere around, I think, 54 senators. President Trump's going to win the popular vote. No one would have predicted that. He's well over 300 electoral votes. He won every swing state, ran the table on the swing state so far, and I think he's going to win Nevada and Arizona when those are ultimately called. And the House is going to stay about the same. There's not that many districts in play, but I think we're going to win the ones that we need to keep it at around 222 or so.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And from there, I want to ask you, where do you think House Republicans should start? And the same goes for an incoming Trump administration. Do you think it should be the economy, the border, the weaponization of the government? Where do you think they should begin?
Well, we must meet the moment. The Democrats had full control of government in the first 2 years of the Biden-Harris administration, and they went for broke. They radically moved the country to the left. They accomplished essentially everything they wanted. They didn't have 60 votes in the Senate, so we cannot fall back on the excuses. First of all, we need to not do an omnibus here at the end of the year when the funding of the government expires in December. We ought to just do a short-term CR that kicks it into the first quarter so that the American people's will, as reflected on November 5, will be determined how the government is funded for next year. It's all about the money. It's all about what we fund. We've got to return to fiscal stability, fiscal sanity, if you will. We've obviously got to secure the border and deport the illegals. We've got to repeal the IRA, the Inflation Increase Act, which brought trillions of dollars of climate credits, which are costing our country from a fiscal standpoint, but also moving us into an extreme climate agenda that's the Democrats' agenda. We've also got to obviously attack the deep state, the weaponization. We got to fire FBI Director Chris Wray and really go after the federal bureaucracy.
Certainly, absolutely. I think a lot of people are finally waking up and realizing so much of the threat we face is coming from these unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. Hundreds and hundreds of federal agencies, all equipped with their own agenda, their own funding, their own staffing, and they're operating with very little oversight, at least not from the American people. And again, they're unelected, so they're not really held accountable to the American people either. And that's just one of the many things that is going on in this country that is just putting us on the wrong track. It's putting us on the wrong track, going to bad places. And this is really our time to turn things around. I'm really unfortunate. I'm sad that things had to get this bad for the American people to really wake up and mobilize and storm the polls, but we finally did. We swamped the vote. It was too big to rig. Very exciting to see that. I'd like to ask you now about this. I mean, what's in store for the future of the Democrat Party? I mean, all the division, they're clearly deeply divided internally themselves. They don't really have a cohesive policy platform at this point, and it seems like their one hope in Kamala Harris to be a coalition builder never really panned out. So what's in store for them?
Well, to your point a moment ago, there's a reason why D.C. voted 92% for Harris. That's because it's federal employees who are all Democrats, and frankly, we ought to fire about half of the 4 million federal employees. President Trump giving power to Elon Musk to do that would be a great start in that direction. But the Democrat Party, they lost because it's not on messaging, it's not based on the candidate. They are wrong on every issue. They don't have anything to run on. The American people rejected their extreme policies. And so this was the best they had. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They didn't have anyone better. Hopefully, we are ushering a new era of conservatism, center-right policies in America. We need it because we can't have anything otherwise fiscally. We can't sustain this open border. We can't sustain this war on American energy. We can't stand any more weakening of our military or these diversity policies. Kamala Harris was a diversity hire as VP. She was a diversity presidential candidate, and American people rejected that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they rejected all these false claims about Trump supporters being some evil, maniacal people. I mean, you're talking about upwards of 73, 74 million Americans at least. So it's really, really quite egregious. And also, like you said, there are so many other issues. I mean, you guys are Kamala Harris, the campaign, coming out and pushing things like late-term abortion when most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, no savings, just trying to keep the lights on, trying to weather the storm until we get back to that point of prosperity economically. So having said all of that, I want to ask you just really quickly here, because I think one of the biggest issues is the national debt. We're nearly at $36 trillion. You just mentioned it as well when it comes to, the continued funding of the government. How do you think we can start addressing that when Trump gets into office?
Well, that's a critical issue. As you said,
Yes.
$36 trillion in debt, over $100,000 per citizen, over $250,000 per household, $2 trillion annual deficit. We're adding a $1 trillion about every 4 months or so. And it can't just be campaign talking points for Republicans. We've got to show the American people that we can be trusted with the full control of government.
Yes.
So we've got to address the discretionary spending. Frankly, most of the discretionary spending, about half of it's totally unjustified. Half of it's for national defense. Most of the rest is not justified. But we've got to reform and fix our mandatory spending as well, because that's causing most of the deficit. And we've got to do it for our kids and our grandkids.
Yeah, absolutely. We owe it to our future selves. And at this point, I mean, as President Trump has said many times before, inflation, that's a country buster. I mean, that is a great way to kill off industry, to kill off your economy. And without that, you're not really going to have much of a country left over. So I think it's really important that we get serious about, like you said, cutting down on discretionary spending. There's a lot of waste and fraud and corruption when it comes to these federal agencies, and it needs to be addressed in a very dramatic and really quite a radical way, because otherwise we will be spent into oblivion. At least that's my fear, looking at the national debt clock just continue to rise and rise and rise exponentially. And it seems like so few people in Washington, D.C. really understand the gravity of the situation, or what that means for our future, our economic security, our well-being, and for the power of the U.S. dollar on the world stage. So this is such a crucial, critical issue. And having said all of that, I just want to wrap up by saying I'm very, very happy about this election result. There's a lot of work to be done. We have a lot to do, but I'm happy we can at least get back on the right track and start doing it. So I'd like to ask you, Congressman, what are your final thoughts here?
Well, you're exactly right what you said about the debt. The inflation the American people are suffering under, the grocery prices, housing prices, utility prices. This is gasoline prices, obviously. This is bad policy, bad economic policy, reckless, wasteful spending, and also the war on American energy. All of that's going to be reversed, Lord willing, under President Trump and a Republican-controlled House and Senate.
Absolutely. Very well said. And of course, thank you for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Riley.